be doing a lot tonight. We're talking about conscious parenting. If you've been with me for a little bit, then you have seen me talk about, you know, my parenting journey a little bit. Starting the parent files. I was on here with my daughter last week. I don't know if I left that video visible or not. So if you caught it, great. If you didn't, that well. Um, I also want to share my recent book haul from the library. Very excited about some new texts I got my hands on. Before we do any of that, I'm feeling a little funny, so I'm having a little bit of yellow tonic, which is garlic, ginger, lemon juice. You take a really tiny sip. I've shown y'all this before. Not even a teaspoon. It'll kill any virus. Ooh, the weather, how it switches from hot to cold in an instant. The other thing I'm going to take is artemisinin. I'm not sure if I like this brand. The last batch I got from Chinatown in Brooklyn, and it was very potent and very powerful. This does not feel as bitter, but it is quite bitter and really nasty to the taste. And I'm going to take this much. And that's it. And I'm probably going to have a little bit of kale while we talk, but I'm going to try not to have too much kale in my teeth. Okay, so conscious parenting. So the term came up recently just online, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what my style of parenting is called. In this, modern age, they've given it a name. When I started parenting, I didn't think of any name for it. I just knew that I wanted to love my child, in the most organic and authentic way. Just wanted to make them feel loved, right? And I knew that I had a responsibility to shepherd this soul that I was bringing into the world, right? Even before I had my daughter, before I ever got pregnant, when I sort of set that intention that I wanted to, be a parent one day, it was very clear to me that the type of relationship I wanted to have with my child would be one of emotional intimacy and, just a joyful, connection, balancing that friendship with that stern hand of a parent, right? When my daughter, when I was pregnant with her, I remember distinctly we had some elders that came over to pray for us, right? Pray for me, pray for the baby. And after they were done, they asked me if I wanted to pray, and I just placed my hands on the belly and just said some prayers. And I just remember them being so stunned at my prayers, and I thought my prayers were just run-of-the-mill prayers to me, yeah, you will serve God. I just prayed for her soul, for her spirit to be in tune with the divine and to be in service to the divine, right? And I think about all of this in the context of my certain shift, my identity, as a spiritual healer, this kind of shaman era that I have entered, and how nobody told me this stuff, right? Nobody said to me oh, this is how you should parent. These were just intuitive things that I knew to be fact, right? I knew these things to be concrete. And so when we think about conscious parenting and the idea of shepherding a child, shepherding a soul, caring for a human being in a way that helps them to get to the fulfillment of their purpose and to the maximum, their maximum potential, right? A lot of it is very intuitive, right? Shout out to my parents and how they're being forced to evolve with me. But the people who talk about conscious parenting, I will cite a few scholars in a minute, but most of this is intuitive, and I just want to share what the download is. But the people, and shout out to y'all in the comments. Thank you for showing some love. I appreciate you. Hi, Devin. Hi, Ram. How do I say it? Ram. That is very sweet. I'm glad to help you soothe, help you calm down. So my experience of, I don't know if I would call it entirely conscious parenting, but it is very intuitive, right? It is very much like you are attuned to the divine, you are connected to the divine, to spirit, and you are hearing from and feeling guidance from the divine in terms of how you guide this child and how you bring this child into the world, and how you nurture this child and shepherd this child and guide this child, right? You are also learning from the child. You yourself as a parent are evolving. You yourself as a human being, you are becoming, right? Through this child. The child is teaching you patience. The child is teaching you about yourself in terms of your interests and your talents. My child was the one who reminded me that I was an artist and I had to be an artist in order to ever feel like my authentic self, right? Because she came out drawing perfect images and taking perfect pictures, right? So there is a very sort of, intuitive, special connection that you tap into when you allow God to guide you as a parent, and when you allow God to guide that intimacy that you have with your child, right? And with my daughter, there was, one commitment that I had, that one thing that I said I wanted our relationship to have in terms of like a characteristic that I wanted our relationship to have. I wanted my daughter to feel comfortable coming to me. I wanted to have the kind of relationship with her that no matter what she did, no matter how bad it was, that she would feel comfortable and safe coming to me and telling me what it was, right? And even if she knew that I was going to be upset or whatever, that she would know that I have her back so hard that there's nothing she could do that I would not have her back. And so it would always be in her best favor, in her best, did I say that right? Yeah, it would always be in her best interest. It would always be in her favor to tell me the truth, right? Now, these things are easier said than done, right? It's one thing to make these commitments; it's another thing to live them through, right? And part of making these ideals real is getting to know your child, right? And I think that that is one of the most overlooked parenting styles, especially, or parenting, strategies, especially in the whole tiger mom, immigrant parent sort of approach, right? Have y'all heard about tiger moms, tiger parenting? Thank you, Treva. Appreciate your sweet words. If y'all know anything about tiger parenting, just tell me something in the comment. Or if you're an immigrant, if you grew up with immigrant parents, tell me something. Tell me about it in the comments. But I'm Nigerian American. I don't really, identify with the American part, but folks will put it on me because I grew up here. So I'm not, I'm not going to pretend like I didn't grow up here. Um, which means that I was raised by parents who came here as adults, um, in pursuit of a better life. Came here to advance their education, came here to, have access to these greener pastures that the U.S. was promising at that time, right? And like most immigrant parents, who especially or have that background of like, the colonial era, the tiger mom term comes from the Chinese community because they operate in a very similar way to like Nigerian families and some Kenyan families, Ghanaians, right? This idea that parenting is about setting your child up for success, and success being that your child has access to a particular, category of careers, right? A lot of these families, obviously coming from colonized lands, had minimal access to the social ladder, minimal access to move up on the social ladder, right? And so the number one strategy for moving up on the social ladder and making sure that your family, your kids, you have housing, you have food, you have shelter, you have protection, security consistently is education, right? And the type of education that would give you access to the particular category of careers that this generation and this population saw as valid, saw as valuable, saw as secure, saw as highest paying, right? So this idea of being a lawyer, doctor, engineer, or failure, right? And so in families where this is the norm, where this is the priority, there is, there is a dynamic between the parent and the child that is very much geared towards making sure that that child can succeed in getting into the sort of like academic and career track that will make them successful in this category of careers, right? So the simple way to say this is, you have to be really hard with your kids, you have to be really strict with your kids in order for them to, one, be studious, make sure that they do their schoolwork, they take education seriously, they don't play around with it, right? um, to make sure that they are excelling, especially in the most important subjects like math and science, right? If they're going to be a doctor, just you got to get all A's, right? I'm sure some of y'all have seen the memes about like, when a Nigerian parent, you take your grades to them and you have like, a 98, and they're like, what happened to the other 2 points, right? This is what we call tiger parenting, right? The tiger mom approach, where it's all about excelling, it's about perfection, it's about success. Um, and within that, you still have a wide range, right? You still have a variety of how relationships can manifest, right? You can still have relationships with a lot of fun, a lot of joy, a lot of playfulness that is balanced with like the strict hand of you must do your work and you must get good grades and you must go to college and you must become a doctor. Occasionally, you have the balance, and then most stories you're going to hear, there's not a lot of balance, and it's just that parent child relationships was fully defined by the parents' focus on making sure that the child was successful, right? So I have a short film on YouTube. I believe it's under the Nora Press page, Nora Press Media. It's called Hyphenated. It was an interview with a subject of my research while I was at Yale. My research focused on Nigerian immigrant identity, and I was interested in this topic partly because of this reason, right? This idea that Nigerians are the most educated in the West, um, but we don't talk enough about like what it takes, like what it costs for Nigerians to become the most educated, right? And so in this particular film, in this interview, my subject talked about how his father, he remembered having like good times with his father as a kid, right? Playing, them playing together, him riding on his father's back. And so he recounts a memory of his father playing with him. He's like 5 years old and he's, playing with him on his back. And then all of a sudden he takes him off his back and he says, now you're going to go to school and I'm not your friend. You have to get good grades, right? So like the relationship completely shifted from child, father, playful love, affection to militant stance on you getting the top education. And that child grew up to get 4 Ivy League degrees. So, that's a perfect example of tiger parenting that got them the results that they wanted, right? Now, is the relationship the what they wanted? You would have to ask the subject of the film that. But from my perspective, in becoming a parent, I knew that I wanted none of that. So there was part of me that was still on this like Ivy League by 16 kick, I still had a bit of that Nigerian exceptionalism in me. Like my child has to excel, she has to be, very, very good at all the things. Um, but I also knew that I wanted to have that intimacy, that emotional intimacy and safety with my child. And, with our unique scenario, her father passed when she was 2 years old. And so him having been sort of the hard hand and the disciplinarian, he was, affectionate with her, he was kind with her, he was sweet with her, but he was the disciplinarian, right? And we're talking about she's 2 years old. So him being a disciplinarian was like very minimal, like a tap for doing the wrong thing, right? Um, but also the stern voice, right? And you know how kids respond to men versus women, right? So him having been that role in her life allowed me to be the affectionate, fun parent that played with her. And, I was also the educator, right? So I was the one who was reading to her and teaching her her alphabet and, showing her content and whatever I thought was going to help develop her. We both engaged her in conversation, but obviously as a mother, as the person who was privileged to spend the most time with my daughter, I had a lot of opportunity to, just really like cultivate her mind, just talk to her, right? Um, but when he passed, there was a little bit of turbulence in that relationship, right? Because now it was like I didn't have the luxury of just being the sweet parent anymore. I had to also balance that with a bit more like sternness, right? And so for a bit that carried, right? For a while, with her going to school, her, getting up in the rising and getting dressed and getting to school on time and all the things, I had to sort of like kick that in. Um, and my daughter was always like, studious, right? She comes from two people who were bookworms. Her father's library is probably the only person I knew that had more books than me. Like that I was close to. I mean, everybody I knew was like bookworms back in those days in Brooklyn. A lot of my close friends were. But like this man had an insane library, right? So I say all that to say like she came into the world of two people who were absolutely like intellectual, like very, very passionate about learning, right? And so she was naturally going to be intelligent. She was naturally going to be curious. She was naturally going to be intellectual, right? So I started the journey with her knowing that my role, my responsibility was to shepherd her soul. And that requires getting to know her, right? It required me paying attention to the little things, me dialoguing with her, me getting, being aware of those little signs. When you're a mother, your new mother, and you can tell when your baby makes a face and that face indicates that they got to go to the bathroom, or you can tell when they're about to cry because they're starting to like, get a little funny. I do have an Instagram, but I don't really be on there like that. So if you want to find me on Instagram, I'm Soul Medicine Sanctuary on Instagram. So yeah, when you're a new parent and you're paying attention, right? And so this is where I start to talk about the idea of conscious parenting paralleling with indigenous love, right? And the idea that this term of conscious parenting is a term that's being applied to something that we indigenous people have always done. And when I say indigenous people, I'm talking about indigenous people of the planet, Black African people, global South people, indigenous people of the Americas, the indigenous people of the planet, the Negroes, the Negroids, the Black, the Africans, right? Thank you for the compliments. I appreciate y'all. So we have always been conscious parents. Okay, I'm going to cite some, provide some citations in a little bit. We have always been conscious parenting. Traditionally, we knew that when a child came into the world, it was our responsibility as a community to shepherd that soul, to shepherd that life, to care for that person, right? To bring out the essence of that individual. That was our responsibility as a community. That it wasn't just about becoming a lawyer, doctor, engineer. It was about fulfillment, purpose, the cosmology, like how you as an individual fit into the imprint of this time, the constellation of this time. What is meant to be manifested in this time, in this family, in this community? This is what we have known indigenously. So I'm going to read you something from my research on what Yoruba culture teaches about parenting, right? Um, let's get up there. Mm. In Yoruba cosmology, a child is not understood as a private possession of two adults. A child is a spiritual arrival, a bearer of Ori, inner head, destiny, spiritual individuality, and a future carrier of family, lineage, communal continuity. So the parent's role is not simply raise my child, it is closer to receive this soul, discern its destiny, cultivate its character, protect the child's spirit, socialize the child into right relationship, and help the child become omoluabi. Omoluabi is a Yoruba term that just means, a good person, a child that is like well behaved, a child that does what is, good character, a child of good character. Um, they define it here as a person of sound character, dignity, wisdom, discipline, respect, and communal usefulness. Scholars of Yoruba thought repeatedly connect Ori, destiny, character, moral agency, and social formation. Wande Abimbola's work on Ifa and Yoruba personality is central here. While Shagun Badegesin, am I saying it right? Bolaji Idowu and others are often cited in debates about Ori, destiny, and moral responsibility. A parent does not create the child's destiny. The parent helps the child's destiny become livable. Let me repeat that. In Yoruba cosmology, the parent does not create the child's destiny. The parent helps the child's destiny become livable. We are so far from that across the board as Indigenous people because of the good old C word, colonization, right? Ongoing colonization, never ended. The colonials, the colonizers came and said, your way of being is outdated, it is demonic, it is, you know, what do they call it? It's just not good enough. It was a term that usually gets thrown around, but let's just say the colonizers came and told us that our culture, our way of life was not good enough, that it was dirty, it was backwards, and we had to adopt this, this Christian way of life or this Islamic way of life. And within that, our identity got lost, our cosmology got lost. Jacob Olupana, he is like the foremost scholar on Yoruba culture and Yoruba spirituality. He is head of divinity studies at Harvard, I believe, right now. He teaches that Yoruba religion, Yoruba tradition is not just a religion in which you do rites and you make sacrifices and you pray to certain orishas or gods. He talks about Yoruba cosmology as a world view, which is true of any other group of people, any other indigenous group of people. When you look at our language and our spiritual beliefs, these are systems of knowledge that teach us how to view the world, how to understand the world, how to understand our role and our place in the world. And when you remove that and you bring in colonization, you bring in Christianity, you bring in Islam, you bring in capitalism, and you say, in order for you to survive, right, you can't pluck mangoes off the tree anymore. You got to go work in the factory. In order for you to survive, you have to work round the clock. In order for you to feed your children, you have to work round the clock. In order for you to be a relevant and respected member of society, you have to leave your home and see your children maybe 1 hour a day if you're lucky. And that is what makes you a respectable member of society. And thus, in that mindset, the idea of you transmitting your knowledge, your culture, your family history, your oriki, where is that, especially when you are in the diaspora? You being able to do that today in Nigeria is rare. Talk less of you being able to do it in the diaspora. So what we lost in colonization, obviously is like everything, but the deeper loss that we rarely contend with is that loss of parental intimacy, that loss of familial connection, right? That sort of depth of familial connection that would have been organic in a culture, in a cosmology where each person understood their role in terms of their responsibility to the community, to the society, and to the timeline, right? To the gods, to the cosmology. When you separate from that as a family, as a people, you become lost. And your goals are only to uphold the imperial, the empire, to uphold capitalism. Because what does our striving to be lawyers, doctors, and engineers do for us. It gives us more money so that we can operate within the capitalist system that extracts our life force, that extracts our resources, that extracts our genius, and gives us nothing back in return except for control and subjugation. So, conscious parenting or indigenous love gives us the opportunity to reconnect with our lineage, reconnect with our children, reconnect upwards and downwards in the lineage, right? And so I have to acknowledge like the great fortune that I have had, because my journey has not been easy. There's a lot that will be said about the struggles of my journey, but one of the most blessed, wonderful gifts that I've had in my life is that I have been gifted with the opportunity to be present with my child for most of her life, nearly all of her life, right? We've had moments where my family has taken her on for some time. We've had moments where we were separated for a little bit, but always I was present, right? Always. And when I say present, I mean in terms of like emotional access. I am not a perfect parent. There's so much I would have loved to do differently and better. Don't get it twisted. But the access that I had to my child, because the work that I was doing was not always, I'm about to block you if you try that again. The work that I was doing was not always like round the clock, overwhelming work where I could not be home with my child or I could not talk to her, right? I wasn't doing the kind of work where I didn't have the opportunity to like teach her about myself or teach her about our culture or teach her about history, right? Homeschooling, unschooling, even when your child is in school, there is an opportunity to educate your child. There is an opportunity to dialogue with your child, to have a dialectic, to be able to bring out of your child the questions and the curiosities that they have so that you can then guide them and shape their thinking and shape their understanding, cultivate their understanding. Right. And so the other key thing I want to say about conscious parenting, and I will come back and we'll continue to talk about this, but the other key thing is the consciousness, the sort of awareness, the mindfulness with which you approach your child and with which you approach parenting in this paradigm allows you to really notice who this child is, who this person is in the present moment, allows you to sense with them who they are becoming, who they desire to become. And then as a parent, you get to leverage the full weight of your knowledge, of your community, of your friends, of your network to support that child in becoming the finest version of themselves that they can become. Right? This is what Indigenous love means to me. This is what affection means to me, parental affection. Right? You love your child so much that you want them to be fulfilled, maximally fulfilled, thoroughly recognized, thoroughly seen for all the gifts that they have, for all the goodness, for their temperament, everything good about your child. You want it to be manifest. You want it to be at the surface. You want your child to feel connected to what is good about them. And where else will they learn that but from you first as a parent, right? My child is in Japan right now. I talked about it on my last live. And it's really funny who YouTube is sending to watch this. Y'all got some really interesting comments. Talked about how she's in Japan and the idea that I could feel comfortable sending her to Japan. She's old enough to do this, right? But my comfort with sending her is not just because of her age or the program or whatever. The program, there's a lot that they could do better, but I feel comfortable sending her because I trust her, because I've taught her, because I communicate with her in a way that I know that she is receiving the knowledge. She is receiving the understanding. It may not always be perfect. She may not always remember everything I say, but I know that she is trying, right? And I also know that she communicates back to me what she is understanding or what she's needing help with. And so because we have that flow of communication, I can trust that wherever she is in the world, as long as I have access to her, please God, that I will be able to support her in materializing the best outcome in any situation. And she will in turn feel supported enough to seek my help, right? Not a perfect science. It's always, an iteration, right? We're always iterating on it, right? And improving. But um, the baseline is that, hey, you can talk to me. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to share my knowledge with you. I'm going to share my understanding with you. I'm going to guide you with what I know and what I believe. I'm going to inquire about what you know and what you believe. I'm going to let you teach me as I teach you. We are equals here. We are collaborators. We are partners in this thing called life. I'm not your boss. That's another conversation we can have. But this idea of like the heavy hand, the top down, it's just not in my nature. So as opposed to I'm your boss and I decide what happens and you must do what I say, I know that I have to get your buy-in. If I want you to behave in a certain way, if I want you to shift, your understanding, if I want you to pursue a particular outcome, because I think that's what's best for you, then I have to get your buy-in. And how do I get your buy-in? But by listening to you, by working to understand who you are, what motivates you, what you care about, what you need, and to then provide as much of that as I possibly can or direct you to where I believe you can get it, right? So I'm going to cite a few other people. There's so much on this topic that I could share. I'm going to just read a little bit more about Yoruba parenting, and then I'll read some more about conscious parenting. So it says here, Yoruba child rearing is deeply moral. The desired outcome is not just obedience, it is iwa rere, good character. This is why omoluabi is so important. The child must be cared for, educated, socialized, and formed into someone whose presence strengthens society. One study of Yoruba popular culture summarizes this clearly. Children are treated as deeply valuable to societal continuity, but that value depends on their internalization of omoluabi values and their care, well-being, and education. This means Yoruba parenting is not only emotional care, it includes correction, modeling, cultural instruction, apprenticeship, language, respect for elders, responsibility, spiritual protection, and participation in household community labor. The parent is accountable for helping the child become a socially grounded human being. Traditional Yoruba education is often described as aiming to foster good character and make the child a useful member of society. So we've said that a few times, right? So now I want to read to you from my recent research on conscious parenting, like where it comes from. So the primary author who is known for coining the term conscious parenting is Shafali Sabari. I'm not sure where she's from, but Dr. Shafali says that conscious parenting is not about raising the child, but about raising the parent's awareness of themselves. So it's, like I touched on this briefly, when you are attentive as a parent, emotionally attentive, spiritually attentive, you recognize how you have to change, how you have to be better, how you have to strengthen in order to strengthen the child, in order to help the child grow, to cultivate the child, right? So when she says it's about raising the parent's awareness of themselves, this is what I connected to. It's a process of growing yourself up as much as helping your child grow up. She describes it as being in the present moment with your child, seeing them as they are, not who you want them to be. One of her well-known lines is, "Our children are born to usher us into our own awakening." For Dr. Shafali, conscious parenting involves shedding ego, embracing humility, and recognizing the child as a teacher as well. Other thinkers in the space, Daniel Siegel, emphasizes the importance of attunement, being fully present with your child's emotional world. Alfie Kohn, known for his critiques of traditional discipline, has argued for more collaborative relationships with children. focusing on long-term values. Even Maria Montessori's approach, though older, parallels conscious parenting by trusting the child's inner drive for development. Overall, many contemporary scholars echo the idea that parenting is about mutual growth, where the parent's self reflection and connection are key to raising more emotionally whole children. How about it? So it goes on to talk about conscious parenting in Yoruba culture and indigenous cultures around the world. Um, and so I was trying to figure out if, any of these people directly cited indigenous cultures as their source of understanding for conscious parenting. Didn't find much there, but you can really see this, just like we talked about how Yoruba culture talks about parenting, or how Yoruba cosmology directs us to parent. You can see this across indigenous cosmologies. So that's all I got on that for today. I'm going to have a little bit of bone broth. Lord have mercy. Good for repairing the gut, strengthening the gut lining, fresh skin, etc. All right, so my library haul, and then we got to go. I've been showing y'all a lot of books. I'm going to be talking a lot more about Afrofuturism. We've talked about spiritual futurism, and we're going to continue to talk about that. But when it comes to Afrofuturism, the father of Afrofuturism is Reynaldo Anderson. So if you don't know about him, look up his work. He has like at least 3, solid books on Afrofuturism. I'm going to get you a few of his titles, actually, because I should know them. But one is Afrofuturism, and then the other is Afrofuturism 2.0, and then the most recent one, he teaches on Afrofuturism in this like techno-fascist sort of timeline. So let's get his book titles. I've been trying to get his books from the local library, but they haven't had them, so I'm gonna have to purchase. I have, I think, one of his. I have his doctoral dissertation on my hard drive. Okay, so I just want his book titles. Afrofuturism 2.0, The Rise of Astro Blackness. Anderson is the co-editor and one of the principal theorists behind the concept of Afrofuturism 2.0. The book expands Afrofuturism beyond science fiction into philosophy, spirituality, art, politics, architecture, media, and Black world making. He has a more recent title, who I don't want to mess up the name, so I want to get the exact title. Afrofuturism and World Order. Yes. So this is the first major monograph where Anderson develops his own sustained argument about Afrofuturism, geopolitics, AI, Black speculative thought, African philosophy, and emerging world orders. So we got to get that copy ASAP. Dark Matter is another anthology of speculative fiction from the African diaspora, edited by Cherie Renee Thomas, including work by Stephen Barnes, Octavia Butler, Samuel Delaney, Tananarive Due, I don't know how to pronounce that, Jewel Gomez, Walter Mosley, Ishmael Reed, and many more. Dark Matter. There's another book that I have been like thirsty for, because ever since I seen it a while ago. It's called Black Futures, edited by Kimberly Drew and Jenna Wortham. Yes, Jenna Wortham. Black Futures. I don't know if there's like a summary of this here, but should I just wait from the intro? I don't know. I feel like I want to read a little bit. Some really fascinating projects in here. It's just like really different Black art. I'm gonna go a bit deeper, and I'll be sharing some of these with y'all. I'm gonna read this conversation between Cyree Jarrell Johnson and Carolyn Lazard. We're going to do a little literacy here. So Cyree says, abled people are always telling me in the future we'll all be sick or that disability is the most likely result of climate catastrophe. And I'm like, everyone I know is already sick. Most of the people I know are already disabled, whether through illness, injury, trauma, congenital disabilities, all of those. Being disabled can be like seeing into the earth's future. We already know what isolation and scarcity look like and their consequences. We survived the eugenics, drank the poisoned water, swallowed the pills when no one could know the results. I think that disabled people already know how to remain resilient against the disabling future to come. Carolyn Lazard says, yes, so much of what disability pride is for me is not necessarily a celebration of illness, injury, trauma, but a pride in our resilience. Disability and futurity appear to be incompatible in an ableist world. The general vibe is that disability is a bad thing and we don't want it in the future. When non-disabled people envision an ideal future, it is one in which disability no longer exists. They want to have found ways to eliminate all potential manifestations of disability through the miracles of technological advancement. Not only is this unrealistic, it is incredibly ableist. So that is one of the conversations in this book, Black Futures. This is a piece called Olympics. I'm going to read the description. Let's get physical in a sense. Olympic opens with a story from Kari detailing his sometime morning ritual of awakening his senses and body with a brisk run on the track behind his house. There is a tenderness described in the story that permeates throughout the book. Although most of the images depict a figure in action, what sticks with me most is the need to prepare to activate your body and mind for physical pursuits and what these actions in turn prepare us for. Sports feels like a testament to endurance, and not just the physical kind, but spiritual as well. What we do under the sun, being a sun people, resonated with me as I experienced Kari's art. So if you can see this piece that we're talking about there. All right, so that's Black Futures, a little bit of a sample. I'm sure y'all know this. I don't know how far I'm gonna get with this one, but this is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Death of the Author by Nydia Okorafor. A friend recommended. Shout out to Rashanis, who got me back to the library because of that specific book, The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. This is just the title that came up when I was looking into Timbuktu, and I was curious about it. Okay, so Prof. Anderson, Reynaldo Anderson, whose work I was just describing, has assigned us to read the glass bead game, which I talked about on a previous live, as well as the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. These are books that are meant to help us in our pursuit of militant discipline, internal and external. So many books. I'm just revisiting some of them that I haven't read in ages. I used to have a huge library. I donated it to the world. This is Trisha Hershey's Rest is Resistance. The book pile is so high it's about to be on camera. When God Was a Woman. That'll be interesting. We got another Nydia Okorafor book. We got the Book of Juju. Okay, and this is a book that I know nothing about, but it caught my eye and I was curious. Necessary fiction. So that's all I got for y'all today. I encourage you to pick up some of these books. What I will be doing is just moving through them, and I might just come on live and just read from them from time to time. If you would like to hear me talk about anything specific, anything dive in deeper on any of the topics that we've touched on, let me know in the comments. If you need help with your college, graduate, professional branding, storytelling, for helping you get into particular programs or opportunities. I'm a savant when it comes to branding, messaging for your identity. What I call identity coaching, identity branding. So team at Nora Labs. And yeah, whatever else you need, let us know in the comments. It's been real. Much love. Take it easy. Stay blessed. Gotta meditate next time.